Hi, my name is Jonathan, and welcome to Defining Advanced Data Policies. Now we're going to cover that zone-based firewall we've been promoting for the last 4 or 5 sessions. All right. So basically, we're going to talk about how to implement that an application firewall and a zone-based firewall. Just so you know, these are 2 different things. An application firewall is basically a stateless firewall, whereas the zone-based firewall is a stateful firewall. Don't worry if you don't know what those terms mean. We'll discuss them in the next couple of slides. All right. So you might want to restrict some applications to specified sites, such as allowing file transfer only to the data center site, but not between spoke sites. In this slide example, we want to block FTP traffic between branch sites in VPN 2, because people still use FTP in 2019. So how do we do this? Well, like before, the very first step is we're going to define a group of interests. And in this case, our group of interest is going to be the branches, so sites 1 through 3. All right. Then we're going to create a VPN list for corporate. VPN list 2. All right. So VPN list 2 is for corporate. And the sites are defined down here. All right. Now we're going to create an app list and say app FTP. If you do app question mark on the V edges, you're going to see a huge list of applications here. All right. And we can also define our own based on protocol and port. And like always, remember, we're going to define a site list, a VPN list, and an app list. Okay. And by the way, there's a long list of predefined applications, FTP in our example. This avoids having to specify various ports per application, because most of those applications are already going to be defined. So this data policy definition is going to be applying to a specific VPN list. And if traffic matches that app list, FTP in this instance, the traffic is dropped with a default action of accept for everything else. Okay? So we go sequence 10, match app list FTP, this guy over here, all right, action drop. Okay? And then everything else is accepted. Remember, this default action accept is unlike ACLs. If you don't put that in there, there is no default action. So you do have to add that default action, just like any other access list in the last 25, 30 years of Cisco. All right. So remember, this policy is going to apply to all branches, but not the data center site. The keyword all means from service and from tunnel, so both directions. Okay. And that's the all we're talking about right there. So how do we do this in the GUI? Well, we'll go to config, policies, just like before. So realistically, there would be a menu here, and there's a little cog thing. That's that cog. Configure, policies, and then we'll click an app data policy. All right. Remember, these are actually previous things they assume at this point that you're familiar with that screen. If you're doing the labs, and if you're in the actually accessing vManage, you'll actually see this as options once you get to the policy page. Okay? So you're going to provide a name for it and a description. These are required. It will not let you continue without those 2. All right? And we're going to choose application firewall. Okay? Remember, we had that box come up. There was that big thing with all those little apps. That's where we got that guy. Okay? And then we'll enter sequence numbers with their match and action statements. On the left, we can choose to reorder the sequence, and we can define a default action. Nope, the term here is application firewall is misleading. This is application filtering because it's stateless, i.e. protocol and port like an ACL, rather than stateful in a typical in a firewall. Just a couple of sentences on this. A stateless firewall does not monitor the state of a traffic flow. It's just unidirectional. I see packets. I look at their IP address, source and destination IP address, and their ports, and I say allow or not. The return traffic, I need another specific statement allowing that return traffic. On a stateful device, like a stateful firewall, I'm familiar with the state, so the return traffic is automatically accepted because it's part of that stateful transaction. That traffic flow is bidirectional. Okay? So we're going to define sites and VPNs to which apply to the policy, and we're going to specify the traffic direction. Remember, we talked about from tunnel, and I want to draw this again because we're mentioning it. Okay? So from service is that side. From tunnel is that side. Okay? All is basically both. So either. Remember, this is from the vEdge's perspective. So from service is coming from the service side, the user side, where our end user bases are. From tunnel is all of our overlay network. Okay? Just like we did in the CLI before, except instead of, so you basically you would have these three options as keywords on this previous slide. Let me go back here so I can tell you what I'm talking about. So right here is where we're referring to that, right? So we could have from service and from tunnel over here. In this case, we have all. And this is where we would do that on the actual GUI if we were configuring it there. The recommendation, by the way, is to configure everything through the GUI and maintain all the vManage control over all of these services and policies. And then click Add. Okay? So the zone-based firewall is a bit different. Okay? So instead of defining protocol and port, who can talk to who, we're going to do it between zones. Okay? So we're going to define our zones. Okay? And then we're going to have a zone-based firewall policy, and then we're going to have it from a source to a destination zone. This is just like the iOS zone-based firewall, if you're familiar with it. We have an inside and outside security zone, and we create rules for traffic moving between those two zones, or 3 zones if we have a DMZ on an iOS firewall. Okay? So to add a new security policy, again, configure. But instead of policies, which is where we've been going before, we're going to go to security. Okay? So this is new, different place. We're clicking around. Okay? So basically, we're going to create a zone list. Then zone lists are going to be a collection of VPNs. Okay? Once we've done that, the policy is going to be matching traffic and deciding to allow or deny it. Okay? So we'll click Add Configuration here, and we'll create new. Once we've done that, we'll do the add sequence and our sequence rule and some match criteria. We can match on destination, destination port, protocol, source data prefix, or source port. Okay? Once we have that, we then create an action, and our actions are drop. Well, we can actually click here, and then you can change it to inspect or pass. Okay? Remember those inspect SIP and expect, there's a bunch of other ones, so that if you wanted to inspect FTP, because we have a different control port versus a data port, so this is where the inspect would happen to make sure that that return traffic makes it. Okay? Basically, the last stop is then we have to create our zone pairs and pairs of VPNs. All right? So we click zone pairs. And then we can create zone pairs and enter the source and destination zones. All right. So here we're defining our zones. So we have a zone for internet and a zone for LAN. And a policy here can contain one or more VPNs. So in this case, we're saying VPN 0 is our internet zone, and VPN 10 is our LAN zone. So if we had so there's LAN, internet. Okay. Then we're going to define our policy. Here we're matching a prefix list, like an object group on an ASA. And then we define the policy. So here's our list. We're matching this prefix, okay, the Meraki cloud. And here's where we're actually defining what we're going to do. So we're looking at UDP traffic. Remember, IP protocol 17 is UDP. And 7351 is our destination port. Okay? And our action here is to inspect it. All right? And if it's not this traffic, drop it. And then here's applying the policy of the zone pair. Source zone, destination zone, and the policy we created right here. Okay? So, unlike the application firewall we discussed before, which is not, the zone-based firewall is a full stateful firewall. Right? This is going to be monitoring your outgoing and incoming connections and the state of those connections. You can display the currently established sessions by using the show policy zone-based firewall sessions command, as shown in this slide. I'm curious how you can have a stateful UDP session, but that's neither here nor there. Not to go into the weeds, but while we don't have an ACK bit to track, we can still inspect that UDP traffic. Okay? Generally, what I'd be looking for is an ACK bit back on the return traffic, indicating that this is a response to an existing session. The firewall would then check its state table, look for the outgoing traffic, match that return traffic, and return it. You can't do that in UDP. In addition to the standard output viewed in most firewalls, in the SD-WAN solution, you're also going to be able to see the zone pair that we're using. And that's over here. The problem here is this scrolled over around, so this should actually be over here. So you notice that it says established, which we don't have in UDP. We only have that in TCP. But they see that as return traffic on another source. Okay? And we also have our source and destination VPNs here. And it's 10 and 0. So it's from the inside LAN of VPN 10 and our outside to VPN 0 for our tunnel. Okay? So we can also display the next hop and action of the zone-based firewall for a given flow with IP addresses, port numbers, protocol as followed. So if we do a show policy service path, VPN 10, on the interface with a source IP and the destination IP and a protocol of UDP and our destination port, right, we'll actually get our next hop is NAT VPN, which is our zone-based firewall inspect. Okay. And here's some troubleshooting on that. Determine whether that policy is effective. You can use predefined counters for each sequence number and the policy. This way we can easily check how many packets and bytes match a particular sequence in the policy. All right. So we're going to be doing this show packet counts here, and then we get a packets and bytes. Packets and bytes. This isn't. There are different columns. So by the way, what we would want to do as we're seeing that traffic, we basically reissue the command and make sure that that's incrementing to make sure we're still matching it. Okay. And by the way, note that we're actually looking at a specific sequence number. Those two match up. All right. So that those two, we're actually looking at that specific sequence number on that policy counter. Okay. So we can use data policies for actions to change the traffic itself. Basically, the application firewall is going to be the stateless firewall, and the zone-based firewall is going to enable a full-featured firewall, full-featured zone stateful firewall that does track the state of every connection. Thank you for watching the policy zone-based firewall video, and stay tuned for more content.